a gap of 20 seconds between what we talk here and the YouTube, right? Natalia, you are an expert, right? You help me, please.
Okay, I can check there every now and then.
Okay. Now, I will start now. We are live. Well, okay, live stream served. We are live. Well, thank you for your presence here, to all these experts on genocide studies, state violence. We have here now a special morning with very special experts on these questions. So I thank deeply to Professor Alma, Professor Haris, Professor Renata, Professor Hikmet, and the other that are with us here. Genocide and state violence is a current hot topic in the world today, as we have never imagined. In Brazil, in Bosnia, Croatia, Australia, US, and all the countries, we have many questions about the reasons, the causes for this kind of all these species of mass violence. To talk about that today, as I told you, we have the best experts on Balkans studies here today. This is the first meeting, the first live of a real net on genocide studies. My name is Flavio. I am a professor of human rights and a genocide scholar in Brazil. I'm a professor at Mackenzie Presbyterian University, as well as the Technological University of Nuremberg. Now, I will introduce you one by one our lectures before they start talking. Our first talk will be offered by Professor Alma Mustafic, a researcher and lecturer at the Utrecht University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. In 1995, Alma survived the Srebrenica genocide, but her father, Rito Mustafic, who worked for the Dutchman, and many other family members did not survive. She held the Dutch state responsible for death of her father, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of her claim in 2013. Nowadays, she is committed to increase awareness and knowledge about Srebrenica genocide. She is also co-developer of a theater play called Dangerous Names, the first play in the Netherlands about Srebrenica from the perspective of the survivors. She challenges the Dutch educational institutions to include Srebrenica in their educational programs. She developed an interdisciplinary honor program for bachelor students called Srebrenica Genocide. She also tries to improve the relationship between survivors and Dutch-backed veterans in particular. Thank you, Alma, for your presence. We are so honored with you here. Now you have the play, you have the word. We are anxious to hear you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Flavio. I have one small correction, because in the Netherlands we don't use word professor. It's for the few ones. So I'm a researcher and lecturer at University of Applied Science in the Netherlands. Having said that, I'm going to try to share presentation with you. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. No. It seems like that someone has to stop sharing before I can share.
Okay. I can make you a co-host to share the screen if you need.
Yes, I would like to share some pictures with you.
Well, now you can do it. You are a co-host now. Yeah? Yes. Okay. Try to, are you seeing the share screen?
Yes, but okay, this one.
Well, I think it's coming.
I see nothing. Just a few, oh. You don't see nothing, right?
Not yet.
Well,
Alma, we started seeing it, then it disappeared. You might try again.
Yeah.
In this meanwhile, I must say that Professor Sylvie Steiner, the Brazilian judge at the ICC, is with us by YouTube. She sent us a message just now. We are very honored, so honored with your presence, Professor Sylvie Steiner. Alma, if you want, you can send me the presentation and I can control it.
Yeah, it's just scrolling down. Okay, this one, and then otherwise I will just send it to you. Well, because of lack of time, I borrowed presentation of my 10 years old, and I hope you don't mind it. And I wanted to share it with you because, you know, while her classmates give presentations about unicorns and stuff like that, she talks about Srebrenica genocide and how this affects, you know, second generations of us. So first of all, I would like to share my personal story with you because I survived Srebrenica, and later on I will like to tell you something about the role of education when it comes to genocide and genocide denial from my professional view. Yes, I must share this presentation with you because I want to show you the pictures that I'm talking about. So okay,
Alma, Professor Alma?
Yes.
I think your voice is low, the sound. May you please talk a little louder?
Yes, I will try, but I hate it
it's
that
better
I cannot
now.
share my presentation with you, you know.
Would you like to chant? Is it possible, Haris?
Flavia, do you want me to try to share mine? So just to see that this works, or?
Yeah, I think it's better if we change the order.
Oh, that's, I'm happy if Alma, it's okay with that. Alma.
In this meanwhile, Alma can...
Maybe email it to Asya or you so that you have it, because it might be a problem. I'll try to share mine now.
Okay.
Okay, it's okay for you?
Yeah.
Alma,
so,
do you want me to go ahead while you are working on your presentation?
Yeah, I will introduce. So, due to the technical problems, we are changing the first speaker. Haris Halilovic is a professor of anthropology and principal research fellow at the Social and Global Studies Center, RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. His research has focused on place-based identity politics, politically motivated violence, forced migration, memory studies, and human rights. His publications include the books Places of Pain, Forced Displacement, Popular Memory, and Translocal Identities in Bosnian war-torn communities in 2013, Writing After Srebrenica, 2017, and monsters of modernity, global icons for our critical condition, co-authored with Julian C.H. Lee and others in 2019. In addition to the academic writing, he has also produced multimedia exhibitions, works for fiction and radio and TV programs. Thank you, Haris, for your presence here. You have the word.
Thank you very much, Flavio. Could we just check that my presentation is now available? I shared it, but I can't see it.
We can see it.
You can see it. Just, I don't know why I can't see it, but I'll try now. It seems that we Bosnians are a bit challenging technologies. Sorry about that. I'll just see why this disappeared.
We can see your screen.
You can see it. You see my presentation.
Now we can see your screen of your computer.
And you don't see my presentation. Just because I can't see.
Not the presentation, not yet.
Okay, I'll try to upload it.
You open your file, yeah.
Is it there now?
Yeah,
yes.
We can see now.
Thank you very much. Very relieved that this works. Flavio, thank you very much for bringing us all together, and I thank all my esteemed friends and colleagues and our audience for spending this morning, evening, I don't know what time might be across the planet. I'm greeting you from Melbourne in Australia. It's 10 p.m. plus over here, going towards deep night. But it's quite a great way to be simultaneously present across the planet with such a great group of people. I'm sorry that Alma's presentation didn't work because we changed the order and I structured my presentation a bit to speak after Alma, which should be a problem, I hope. When discussing this presentation, we also agree that this is going to be for educational purposes, especially for Flavio's students and Renata's students in Brazil, but that we will use this as a resource for our students and also make it available to our colleagues. So in a way, I also had that in mind when preparing this presentation. So I hope that's at least to you who are experts in genocide studies and international law, this won't be too basic, too boring. But let me start now with my presentation. And let me start with at least the early definition of genocide. So genocide has become a word widely used, sometimes used as a buzzword, and without really reflecting on what it means and how it originated and also when, the context. So Raphael Lemkin in 1944 initially defined genocide as a coordinated plan of different actions aimed at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups with the aim of annihilation the groups themselves, or destroying themselves. It is, as Flavio said, a state crime. State have mechanisms to commit genocides because it's a complex crime, very holistic crime, if you like. And as late Zygmunt Bauman also stated, it's a modern crime. So the modernity can be linked to the Holocaust, as he argued, because it's not only the manpower and technology required for to try to destroy a whole group of people, but also the ideas, bureaucracy, the whole kind of system that can be used rather than serving humanity, to use it to destroy humanity. The United Nations Convention on Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide defines genocide in very simple terms, and that's what legal experts look when analyzing crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity. If they have that genocidal dimension, they look at this list of crimes. So it's what they involve. They involve killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, which is slightly less precise, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So it's not just that people need to be completely destroyed, destroying people in part, and most people who went through genocidal violence actually were destroyed in part, not necessarily completely, at least not in the initial state of genocide. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, it's also constitutes genocide, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So it's not that all the listed crimes need to be committed in every genocide. Even one of these would prove that the intention was to destroy people. As an anthropologist, I look at that holistic dimension of the crime of genocide. So genocide is a cosmological destruction. Genocide is a unique form of violence that seeks to obliterate the entire cosmology of an entire group. It's not just physically destroying them, but really destroying their identity and their even memories of their existence. So it includes physical violence, which is the most brutal, and the first kind of reaction that we all have is seeing bodies piled after massacres that we associate with genocide. Though, so genocide do involve this. So, but also it's not just destroying a generation that gets killed; it's a transgenerational genocide. Even the term genocide, the origins of it in a way invoke that this is transgenerational genocide. It's not committed only against one generation. And the social worlds comprised of all features that undergird a society's organizing sociological framework also get destroyed. And we could have seen this in various cases of genocide, including the one that we are focusing on today, the one committed in Bosnia between 1992 and 1995. And my focus, while looking at the kind of broader picture of genocide and the broader story of genocide, my focus will be on the genocide in Bosnia. Professor Greg Stanton, a genocide scholar, a very prominent genocide scholar who also established Genocide Watch, established a list, which is a list in progress, I could say, initially as 8 stages of genocide, then adding 2 more stages of genocide, and analyzing Bosnian genocide for several years. I also dared to add the 11th stage of genocide, which is not only specific to the Bosnian context, but actually I did use the evidence from Bosnia, or more precisely from Serbia and part of Bosnia dominated as Serb, to argue that there is not only denial as the last stage of genocide, but even triumphalism, so celebrated genocide. These 11 stages involve classification, symbolization, discrimination, dehumanization, organization of genocide itself, polarization of society, preparation for actual extermination, persecution, extermination, denial, and triumphalism. I highlighted here classification, which sometimes might look banal and harmless even, and link it to extermination. So these stages are interlinked. And as Greg Stanton and colleagues argue, genocide can be prevented in any of these stages. So these stages are not just there for us to retrospectively analyze genocide, but also to look at the world right now and identify any of these stages that might be in place. And sadly, there are many societies across the world that have the time one or another of these stages. Let me move on with these stages, and I'll be very brief, just to not to waste a lot of our time. And this will be available to everyone, and it's actually available anyway in different resources that are online. So classification, very, very prevalent, I must say, in today's world, where polarizing between us and them across various identity characteristics has been happening, continues to happen, and that's how that classifying us and them in a way prepares that genocide potentially to happen in the future. It's not always only ethnicity, only the race. It also can be sexuality, or can be class, as we witnessed in the case of Cambodia, for example. And societies become polarized. That polarization happened in former Yugoslavia and in Bosnia, and happened in Rwanda, and it happened in all genocide prior to those genocides. It continues to happen. Symbolization, symbols are powerful. Symbols are never to be taken just as some harmless iconography. Symbols can mean, and usually do mean in genocide, life and death. So Germans, as widely studied Holocaust, is in a way kind of the platform from where we all build, from which we build up on our theories and our analysis. And in the Holocaust, this was very well documented, and how Jews were symbolizing Jews through also yellow star, but also the Nazis had their own symbols, which were very, very specific. And in other genocides, including the genocide in Bosnia, these symbols also were introduced to point to both victims and perpetrators. Discrimination is the first practical stage of genocide, where people start being discriminated against, segregated, put in different parts of a city, country, creation of ghettos, people losing their jobs, or requiring special documents for the basic freedom of movement, for example. This dehumanization is part of every genocide, because committing violence against another human being does require a level of desensitization, and the very effective psychological mechanism is through dehumanizing the victim, so where that victim is seen as a lesser human being and not even a human being. So in Rwanda, Tutsis were labeled as cockroaches, and as such they were subhuman, even sub-animal level. So it was probably the psychological level not only justified, but even easier to destroy these people. In Bosnia, Bosniaks, who are Slavic people and lived in a shared federation of Yugoslavia for more than 4 decades, and previously another South Slavic state, suddenly became referred to as Turks, meaning those who don't belong there and who are invaders. And even a professor of biology, Serbian politician, who is the only woman who was sentenced for war crimes that she committed and participated in or incited in Bosnia, Biljana Plavšić, she referred to Bosnian Muslims as genetically inferior people. So the science is used to dehumanize people. Organization, there is always an idea that involves genocide. It's not just that people start hating each other without any purpose. So organizing that genocide requires also ideology and clear military aims. Usually this is around territory, around resources, so all about Lebensraum or life space, as it was the case with the Nazis. Similar situation was down in the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavia, where the idea of Greater Serbia was very much around Lebensraum for Serbs. And the problem, like with the Nazis, was that space, that Lebensraum, was inhabited by other people. Polarization, further polarizing society, and then preparation. Preparation is not done in some primordial context where people just hate each other, or they woke up one morning and remember that they hated each other in the past and then start killing each other. That kind of primordial idea of ancient hatred has been out there when discussing the violence in different states, including down in Bosnia and former Yugoslavia. But really, there is no evidence that any ancient hatred theory was in play, that ancient hatred actually played a role. It was very modern, very well organized in buildings, in government buildings, such as the one here pictured on this slide in Belgrade, where the genocide was planned as a kind of bureaucratic matter as well. Preparation, once the tanks and military uniforms in the streets, going somewhere to a city or village, it's only way to stop them actually would be military action or humanitarian military intervention that happened in Kosovo. And then persecution follows. I use here some of the black and white pictures and also those in color, those from the Second World War. As you can see in color, they don't actually, they are very much telling the same story. Extermination is very brutal and physical, involves killing people through using guns, but also all other means, because exterminating a whole people, as regardless of how small or big that group is, requires substantial technical and human resources to commit the killing. And not only the killing, but also subsequent destruction of the evidence of crime, of bodies, either through destroying them completely, such as burning the bodies, or putting them in mass graves, as has been the case in former Yugoslavia and in Bosnia. Extermination takes place through bringing the victims together in one place, detaining them, and this makes, of course, the killing process easier. So it is mass killing that takes place. And then when people get killed, the perpetrators do not say, yes, we've done it. There's a whole machinery that's put in place to deny the genocide is happening, and this actually goes throughout where the genocide is being committed. So a lot of that is covered either through machinery and by putting bodies in earth, or through propaganda, to destroying evidence, to destroying documents, through lying, creating alternative versions of the events and stories. And we titled this event today, we use the term post-truth, and this is actually very, very serious issue in the age that we live in, where social media and internet platforms provide access and possibility to anyone to disseminate any sort of stories, and denying of genocide, it takes big part on the internet. In the case of Bosnia, however, the denial which exists and existed there has also been complemented by the 11th stage of genocide, the stage I call triumphalism. This is very sad, especially taking into consideration how much effort has been put in establishing the ICTY, the Hague Tribunal, bringing war criminals to the court, and then going through the process of establishing the facts, and then actually ruling if they were guilty or not, if the crimes were committed or not, and what kind of degree of crimes. In spite of several cases that were at The Hague that were ruled as genocide, and several key perpetrators receiving life sentences, there's a celebration of crimes of genocide down in the Balkans, in particularly in Serbia and in part of Bosnia dominated by ethnic Serbs, where genocide is seen as a kind of cultural performance, has been entering policy and popular culture, and even becoming media entertainment in some instances, where the victims are being mocked, the perpetrators being regarded as heroes. And this is not just some kind of in a subcultural context. It's very mainstream, and the politicians have awarded the highest honors to the sentenced war criminals such as Karadzic and Mladic. In Bosnia, genocide had all these elements. So going through the stages and going to establish as a scholar looking through what constitutes genocide and how actually genocide was perpetrated, it was a textbook genocide, we can say. Sometimes my students ask me, didn't we learn anything from the Holocaust, meaning us as humanity? And I could, and actually I do answer to that. Also, perpetrators, they also have learned from the Holocaust and from other genocides by literally copy pasting the previous genocides and using from concentration camps, for example, to ethnic cleansing, expulsion of people, to mass killings, dehumanization. So everything was in place, or everything, they didn't need to invent anything, basically. They just had to apply, and they did apply, sometimes even using the symbols that Nazis use, sometimes using nicknames. For example, one of the sentenced war criminals used the nickname of Adolf by very brutal killing in a concentration camp in Bosnia. So it was a lot of symbolism from other genocide that's used, but in terms of operational part, it's very much inspired and sometimes literally copy-pasted from previous genocide. This picture from 1992 Bosnia could be also from, I don't know, Poland, 1940s. It is barbed wire. They are men, starved behind the barbed wire. They are tortured. A lot of them won't survive. That picture might be the only evidence of their existence, at least at that time. Most of the victims in Bosnia were then put in mass grave sites. Some bodies were destroyed and never recovered. And those mass grave sites were spread throughout the country and at hidden locations. There were multiple attempts to hide the crime. So the previous or primary mass grave sites were then moved to secondary sites in the process of, so also the bodies got mixed up and destroyed. And it's taken a lot of effort to not only identify the mass grave sites, but to exhume the bodies, to put them together. And luckily, the DNA technology that got developed has been a great help in assisting in identifying or bringing the identities to these victims. International Commission on Missing Persons has identified some 75% of the actual victims. The survivors, to them, those who they lost, they are not bones in mass graves. They are also people with names, with stories, with faces. And they've been the mothers of Srebrenica, like mothers in many other countries who lost their sons, and wives who lost their husbands. So women has been at the forefront of not only fighting for some sort of justice, but fighting actually for finding the truth about what happened to their relatives and to bringing their identities back to them, which is both kind of technological process or biomedical process and forensic process, but to them it also involves rituals of burying the victims and having a grave where they can make a closure and know that their loved one has been buried as a person. So a personhood in a way is being reestablished through this process. Still in Bosnia, anyone who is doing research on genocide in Bosnia, on the missing people, and there are various aspects of genocide research that my colleagues are focusing on. So the missing people, especially my colleagues anthropologists, have been looking at this issue because of the complexity, because of the ongoing problem that continues to persist and affects communities. So they are bags, they are not body bags, they are bags with mixed bones that are literally stored in warehouses, and everything was improvised there because no one was ever prepared to have tens of thousands of bodies or skeletons to be housed anywhere. Also the burial of the victims, and also to be reinvented for the first time, because for the first time there were collective burials sometimes of up to 800 bodies in a day, which kind of was very industrial scale burying the victims. And I'm sure Alma will show some of the pictures. At the end, like in Alma's story that we will hear, there's bringing identity to numbers of the people who count as missing, presumably killed. There's a document, so also bureaucracy comes at the end where that identity is brought back. As I said, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, has established multiple times that genocide was committed in Bosnia, in the case of Srebrenica, especially, but I would argue that genocidal violence was started in 92 and continued out in 95. Some of the pictures that can be also seen in the recent feature movie made by the Bosnian filmmaker Jasmila Žbanić, called Ko Vadis Saida, the movie that was actually nominated for the best feature movie in foreign language for the Oscar. So it's still out there to be seen, and probably the fiction sometimes can fill the gaps that facts cannot and are missing. More recently, researchers have gained access to huge archival material that's been going through and reading transcripts, and every crime that was committed in Bosnia was directed from above. There's evidence for that. Even the codes were used sometimes. At other times, perpetrators didn't care much. So there's evidence, for example, about Srebrenica genocide. In this transcript, they say kill them all, everything going according to the plan. So some key words referring to genocide actually can be read from this transcript. And for more transcripts, you can go to the Genocide Papers, a huge database which has now been analyzed and made accessible by the colleagues at the Memorial Center Srebrenica Potocari. As I said, talking about genocide is not only reflecting and retrospectively looking at what happened, but it is also, very much looking at what's happening now. So Genocide Watch looks and analyzes situations in different countries, and this is now a few months old map. So there are different stages of genocide that are being taken place in several countries across the world, and probably there would be a few more now. And the data which is up to date you can find on the Genocide Watch website. So genocide studies is not, as I said, a historical study. It's very much applied discipline, and the ultimate aim of genocide studies is to prevent a future genocides, to identify them, of course, by using the knowledge from previous genocides to apply in the contemporary context. So I apologize for rushing a little bit. I realized I had too many slides, and I didn't want to this to become my own monologue. There are my colleagues who will fill the gaps, and I'm sure also tell many more engaging and interesting stories relating to this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Haris. Your presentation was absolutely amazing and important. I received some comments here, and your overview about these facts, these structures that characterize genocide is very important to our students that do not have this day-by-day contact with the subject. Thank you very much. We can now come back to your presentation. Now, I think we will have a happy moment with to hear Alma. Alma is okay with her presentation. And now you have the word, Alma. Thanks again for your presence here.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Yes, okay. I think this is going to work out even better because now students can try to discover different phases of genocide in my story. So thank you, Haris, for your introduction. Just like I said, due to the lack of time, I borrowed this presentation from my 10-year-old, and I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to let you see this while her classmates give presentations, about unicorns and stuff like that. She's only 10 and she talks about Srebrenica genocide. And this affects second generation as well. So first of all, I will share my personal story with you, and later on, like I said, I'm going to say a few words about the role of education when it comes to genocide. This picture, this place, every time we go to Srebrenica, this is the first place we visit. And in the middle, you can see my daughter standing. She's wearing a light blue coat. You can hardly see her among all those countless tombstones, you know. And I really don't know how many family members and friends I have lost in Srebrenica genocide. Last year, we tried to count and we got to 56. And then we just stopped. We couldn't go on. If I want to visit them all, I have to walk around all day long. And at the end of the day, I didn't get a chance just to say El Fatiha to all of them, just to greet them. So all those people here, they were killed just in a few days. You can imagine that it takes a great organization, just like Haris was saying, and that it cannot be done by a few individuals. And as we know, behind every genocide, there is a great organization, institution, the whole country. And in this case, it was no different. So can I have next slides? It's always interesting to see that she just wanted to show people, you know, to see us as human beings. So she loves to share those pictures. This is before war, before aggression started. And on the left, you see my parents. And in the middle, this picture, the smallest one, that would be me. And next to me, my brother with my mother. But those people around us, they are Serbian friends of us. And to the right, you see my mom with her best friend, and she is also a Serbian woman. So we never thought about those differences in the beginning. I was raised in Yugoslavia, you know, brotherhood and unity, that was everything for me. My father was a communist. He was not religious. And I didn't even know the difference between the names. For example, you know, Haris, Alma, Hikmet, those are Bosnians' name, and Jovanka or Milenka would be Serbian names. And I didn't know this. I had to learn about those differences during the war. So the life was good in Srebrenica. I had a wonderful childhood, and my father and my mother, they had a great job, and I was around about 11 years old when everything started. And next picture, you can see Srebrenica before the war. It's an old postcard. And you see it's a small town in a valley surrounded by mountains. And at the bottom to the right, you see a small mosque. And behind it on a hill, you can see an Orthodox church. It's just a few meters away. And there is also a Catholic church, and not so far from here, but you cannot see it in the picture. So living together was never a problem. Although I was born in Srebrenica, I spent lots of my time with grandpa and grandma who lived in a village on the river Drina. And I put the next picture special for, for Haris. Every Bosnian, especially from East Bosnia, has one great love, and that is definitely Drina. So we love to spend time here. So when the situation started to get a bit difficult, we thought this is going to be over soon. Let's go to grandpa and grandma, have a little vacation, you know, for a while, and it will be over in a few days. And those few days quickly turned into a few months. Srebrenica has been taken by Serbian paramilitaries and almost completely destroyed. They didn't stay long, and after a few months, we were able to return to Srebrenica, and this is what we found. Next picture, please. almost all of our houses were set on fire. We heard that they killed everyone that they could get their hands on. Some of the people were even burned alive in their houses, and Srebrenica was almost empty. So this was a great shock for me. And then Serbs did left Srebrenica, but they were on those mountains around, just like you could see on previous picture. And from there, they shot at us on daily basis. So we had nowhere to go. Everything was cut off, like no water, no electricity, no food, nothing at all. And at the same time, more and more people were expelled from all over East Bosnia, and they all flee to Srebrenica, a lot of them. So Srebrenica began to fill up with refugees, and from those refugees, we heard the most terrible stories. Men were killed, women would be raped, and whoever could flee, they came to Srebrenica. But as I said, in Srebrenica, there was nothing, and people just start to die because they didn't have enough food to eat. And when it was the worst, then the General Marion came to Srebrenica, and soon after that, Srebrenica became a safe area. And I think the next picture shows a few pictures about that. So the first blue helmets came, and we really thought, yes, we are liberated, and we are safe. It's over. The war, the aggression is over. We knew nothing. The worst was yet to come. And my father started then working for Dutchbat, and life started to get better. And he got on very well with Dutchbat soldiers. And they came often to our home. So we had enough food for the first time. And the next dia shows a few pictures, I think, from that period. And this picture was taken, I think, a few weeks before the fall of Srebrenica, to the right. That is the first and last picture of whole family, because my sister, baby sister, was born during the war. So when Srebrenica fell, you can imagine we knew very well that we couldn't expect anything good from Serbs. So everyone fled in panic to the base of Dutchbat, and as my father was working there, he too, he was sure that they would save him and us. And we could get inside the base. We were safe there. And I never thought that we would have to leave the compound. And next dia shows how many people came to the base, I think. So the moment when my father was separated from us, I think that is definitely the moment that I will never forget. We were together, my father, mother, my brother, my baby sister, and I, and we were inside the UN base in Potocari. And because of my father's work, we could stay in his office. So we didn't have to stay with all other refugees. There were maybe 5,000 refugees inside the base. They were allowed to enter the base, and they were kept in a large hall on the other side of the compound base. And my father was able to get my aunt and her two children inside as well. So we were all together in his office, and as long as we were together, it felt good. We knew that something terrible is going to happen to us if we fell into the hands of the Serbs. So that was to be expected, because we have been living in an, I call it, open air concentration camp for almost 3 years, thanks to them, and they made our lives unbearable those 3 years. They shoot at us almost every day, even when I was playing outside, even at the children playing outside. So because of all of this, we couldn't expect anything other than inhuman treatment if we ended up in their hands live. So we felt very safe inside the base, and we felt so sorry for other people who were not allowed to enter the Dutchbat base. There were about 20,000 refugees, as you can see on this picture, outside the base, without supervision, without any protection at all. So they were exposed to the terror of the Serbs. And because of our own experience during the war and the things they did in Prijedor, like Haris just mentioned in 1992, beginning of the war, like mass killings, concentration camps, mass rape camps, we knew they would do the same to us. And this was the same army, you know, the same people, same ideology we had to deal with. It was nothing new to no one, not to us, neither to UN or international community. So as long as we were inside the base, we felt safe. We never ever thought that we would be forced to leave the safe base. We didn't believe that UN would force us to leave and hand us over to the Serb butchers. And however, at one point, Dutchbat soldiers entered the office of my dad, and they just said to us that we had to leave. We were flabbergasted, unbelievable, you know. We didn't want to leave. In fact, we wanted to stay inside the base, but that was not allowed, not possible. They kept saying, everybody has to leave. Even my father, who could count on special protection because of his work, he had to leave too. So to make sure that we did actually leave the base, Dutchbat soldiers escort us to the main exit. We were literally handed over to Serb force, and I still remember, you know, the steps and counting down. I'm one step closer to the danger. I'm still inside the base now, but soon I will be outside the base in the hands of the Serbs. What will happen then? Will they rape me? Will they kill my brother? We knew that my father has no chance of survival. It was generally known that Serbs would murder every man between age of 15 and 65. So we had no illusion that my father would survive. And I was extremely afraid for my brother because of his age. He was 15. But it was to his advantage that he didn't look that old. So once outside the compound, my father was immediately put aside by a Serb soldier. He said to him, "You stay here." And my mother tried to beg that Serb soldier to let my father go, but he just pushed her away and said to her, "You can stay here with your husband, or you can try to get your kids to safety. What will it be?" And my father turned to my mom and made it clear to her that she has to take care of us without any words, just with his eyes. But we understood his message very well. He was carrying my baby sister. She was 2 years old at that time. So he gave her to my mom. We didn't have any time for goodbyes, no kiss, no hug, nothing at all. We were pushed by Serb soldiers forward and we were not allowed to look back. And yet I tried to. I was looking for my father. I wanted to see his face one more time because I knew it was the last time I would see him alive. But in vain. I couldn't see him. I saw my math teacher's secret, but I couldn't see my father anymore. So I kept looking backwards, and I remember my brother saying, "Do not look back, do not look back." And then a journey full of terror awaited us, you know, but you never hear about this in the media. We were put into a bus, and the buses would take us to a free territory. But we had to stop every 10 to 50 minutes. The Serb soldiers or regular Serb people would enter the bus and demand everything. They smelled of alcohol and they act like possessed, you know, waving with knives and it was terrible. We were extremely scared. They were looking for men, and if there were no men, they took boys or wanted to have young girls. And when they asked if there were any young girls in the bus, I just froze. Even though I was 14 years old then, I looked like I was 17, and girls my age were raped. And we know the story from Ternopilje concentration camp, where the youngest girl was only 9 years old who was raped. So we were familiar with those survivor stories from the beginning of the war, and I tried to hid myself under a girl. She was maybe 4 years old, and she was sitting on my lap. Luckily, the subs were chased away by an old woman. She said, "Go away, we are here, only old women and kids, leave us alone." And he left the bus. I was relieved for a moment or two, but 10 minutes later, we stopped again and we experienced all the horror, over and over again. At one point, 2 girls were put into our bus. They looked terrible. They could barely walk. The older woman took care of them. It was so sad, you feel absolutely powerless. I was not afraid of being killed. So during this deportation, we saw many bodies on the side of the road. We heard screaming by Serb soldiers, singing, people were beating. We heard the executions, but the physical assaults, that was really the worst. Once again, we had to stop, and a Serb soldier stepped into the bus. He was very drunk. You could smell it. And he was holding a bloody knife, about 12-inch long. And he screamed, "Bula," like Bula is a curse name Serbs use for Muslim woman. "Give you money and everything that you have to us. Take off those rings, and earrings. And because if we have to do it, we will cut it off." And he starts waving with his bloody knife. We were thinking, here, you can have everything, just leave us alone. And if we had no money at some point, we didn't have any money to give them, they would get angry and wanted to take boys and girls. And you can imagine, I'm still a bit traumatized when I think about this all. And the worst part is that nobody knows about this. The Dutch bed soldiers, they came to the Netherlands and they claimed that they have saved 3,000 women and children, and that we have reached the free territory unharmed. Unharmed. So that hurts a lot. And it feels like being abandoned for the second, for the third time. So having said this, I would like to say a few things about genocide denial, because this is about genocide denial. There are many forms of genocide denial. Unlike clear deniers who just say there was no genocide, no one takes those seriously. But the real danger is in those who make people doubt. They are not saying it didn't happen, but they just start spreading conspiracies, theories, make it extremely complicated, compare apples and oranges, spreading propaganda. And at some point, people start to think maybe that could be right. Usually they are very well aware of the evil work that they are spreading. And behind this is also a great organization, just like there was organization behind all those killing. It is in someone's interest to lie and to deny genocide. And it serves a purpose, and that purpose is covering up a genocide. And those people we cannot educate. because they don't want to understand. They just want to cover it up, But lots of people, they are unaware of those different forms of genocide denial. By lack of knowledge, they end up downplaying a genocide, like those Dutch belt soldiers, for example, who say we saved women and children. And finally, we have this third group of people, ordinary people, who simply just don't care. The people who became indifferent to genocide and human suffering, who would rather not know and learn about genocide. And I understand this, because thinking and learning and knowing about genocide is horrible, and people rather think about nice things. But we need to be reminded of human suffering, so that we know what freedom means, and that we must protect our freedom and each other, especially in difficult times like those. So not knowing about genocide is bad, but not wanting to know is even worse. And in the end, it's very dangerous for our freedom, because we must be able to recognize first signs of genocide. And as Haris just pointed out, genocide is not the last, but one of the last stages of genocide. We must try to combat it regardless, whatever it concerns Holocaust, Armenian, or Srebrenica, or any other genocide. There should be no room for genocide denial. So I could go on for hours, but I think we can have some questions at the end of this conference. I would like to hear another colleagues as well.
Thank you, Alma. Your presentation is very, very important to us. Your dramatic human aspects that you brought to us must be known to, especially by the young generation. This is why we are here. And I took some notes here, especially about the importance to create an educational project on genocide education, right? Genocide.
Yes.
This is, I think we can explore more in our future projects, all of us.
Yes,
in our
I
net.
didn't mention it, but my PhD proposal deals with these questions about education of genocide in general, and especially about Srebrenica genocide in the Netherlands. Because in the Netherlands, the students have to learn about Srebrenica. It's one part of history, canon of history. So there are 50 subjects that students have to learn about, and one of those subjects is Srebrenica. And so they have to learn about it, but on the other hand, we did have some research, and the three main conclusions were there is hardly any learning about Srebrenica. If the students learn something, then usually it's not correct. And the third one was that it's always from Dutch perspective. And this is really problematic. And because I try to make educational program on Srebrenica in the Netherlands, and the people would say to me, there is a lot of resistance, like, but we don't get why should we learn about Srebrenica. So I have to explain why is Srebrenica special and important to learn about, and that I remember reading the book of Elie Wiesel, The Night.
Yes.
Yeah, and he
Elie
was
Wiesel.
saying when we survive genocide, we actually had to explain to other people that we were genocide survivors. And 15 years later on, I still have to explain to people that I'm really genocide survivor. So we really need to learn about this in a proper way.
Well, we certainly must explore and to spread this idea. Your incredible project is very important to us. Thank you. I have some comments here by Professor Raquel Guerra and others. Well, we can after these two wonderful presentations, I must introduce you, Professora Renata Suma, our colleague in genocide studies. Renata Suma is a postdoctoral researcher at the International Relations Institute from the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. She was a visiting researcher at Open University in UK and also at the University of Graz in Austria. She is a co-founder of the research group LEEM, Eastern Europe in Movement, and the author of Everyday Boundaries, Borders and Post-Conflict Societies from 2021. Thank you for your presence here, Professor Renata. I'm very, very honored to have here maybe the most, the greatest expert on Balkans questions in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I am the one who is very honored to be here. So I wanted to thank Flavio and Asia, who invited me to be part of this panel. I'm a strong admirer of the work of my colleagues who are here, and I felt it's a huge responsibility to talk after people like Haris and Alma. They gave such great presentations, and I will try to make some points to discuss a little bit about what I see as the rationale. So Haris has already presented those steps, and I will try to focus more or less in two of those steps and try to make a connection with the situation of these steps as I saw it in my research in Bosnia, but also since I come from Brazil and there is this Brazilian dimension in this event, I will talk a little bit about the situation in Brazil as well. So my work on Bosnia and Herzegovina is not directly related to studying genocide. As you might know, what we call the war in Bosnia is composed by a series of violent events that unfolded through almost 4 years. But as you could see from Haris and Alma's presentation, it continues to have a huge impact on everyone's lives. So the idea of these transgenerational effects, right? Only one of those events that happened in Bosnia, as was discussed by Alma and Haris, was considered legally as a genocide, the Srebrenica genocide. But as you could see also from their presentations, there were so many other events that might fulfill those items that Haris showed, but were not considered legally a genocide. So my research was conducted in 2 different cities in Bosnia, Sarajevo, which is the capital of the country, and Mostar. Both cities have suffered a lot during this war. Sarajevo was a city that is often praised by the mixture of different cultural legacies, a place of encounter among different cultures, religions, empires, and it was targeted precisely because it represented the possibility of difference, the possibility of conviviality. Sarajevo endured 1,425 days of siege. The army of Republika Srpska fired against the Bosnian capital using heavy artillery or snipers. The same army of Republika Srpska's operation against the people of Sarajevo were never recognized as a genocide by an international court, but have been labeled an herbicide, which means a deliberate targeting of urban life, which involves the destructions of buildings as a condition of possibility of being with others, as it it is defined by Martin Coward. The agenda of ethno-national cleansing targeted the shared stories, cultural, and heritage in Sarajevo on a daily basis, destroying the city's social tissue and hampering any possibility of a normal life. Just to be clear, the General Ratko Mladic, who you saw in the previous presentations, and who was also leading those attacks against Sarajevo, was taped saying the following sentences, and here I quote, "Go on with the artillery fire, don't let them sleep, let's make them crazy." And when he was saying them, he was meaning all citizens of Sarajevo. Mostar had a different story during the war, but also a very violent story. This story comprises former neighbors being categorized as enemies, heavy battles in the city center, and infamous practices that came to be called ethnic cleansing, a very disturbing term that I consider, that consists in trying to turn, by all means, a certain space into a homogeneous space. In the case of Mostar, that meant chasing people who lived in certain neighborhoods and who were classified as Bosniaks, for example, throwing them at prisons or concentration camps, threatening them, making them move to the other side of the city. So what emerged during the war was the very idea that there were sides of the city, that there is now a right side depending on your ethno-national affiliation. So I want to focus here for a minute on what I have just stated, because it's a crucial feature in genocide and political violence events. I am talking about imagining spaces. Spaces must be imaginatively constituted by nationalists and extremists as ethnic spaces, as territories that belong to certain groups, as part of their national homelands, even if these not correspond to any reality on the ground, as was in the case of Bosnia. And please, I invite everyone to think closely to this idea and realize that there is nothing natural with the idea of ethnic space and territories. This is a process that turns a multicultural or cosmopolitan city into an ethnic city, that turns neighborhoods into ethnic neighborhoods, and that states who should live where, and introduce the idea that there is a right neighborhood, a right territory, a right entity to live in. And that was a crucial process that led to the war in Bosnia and was consolidated through war. We do see the results of such politics today in Bosnia. They are sustained by a complex political design, but also by practices of remembering and forgetting. Thus, we have, for example, a huge number of street names that have been changed to either erase a shared past or to turn that place more related to one ethno-national group than the other. We have a number of religious buildings that were destroyed and never rebuilt. And on the other hand, we have a number of religious buildings that were built after the war to affirm one's presence into a certain space. We have the change on street signs, the adoption of different colors on the street signs, the separation of Latin and Cyrillic scripts in the streets, in schools, in shops. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about, the importance of imagination of the space and this dynamic and a particular dangerous imagination that looks for homogeneity, that associates difference with conflict and war, and sameness with peace and prosperity. A second very prevalent feature that also Haris has talked about a little bit already is the attempt to dehumanize a certain group. This is something present, I would say, in all genocide events. Primo Levi, who is a famous Jewish Italian writer, described a remarkable scene in his book, If This Is a Man, where he recalls his experience in Auschwitz. He recalls an encounter within the concentration camp with Dr. Panwitz, a German who was conducting a chemistry test to identify if there were someone among the prisoners who could work in his chemistry lab. Primo Levi who was graduating in chemistry, took the test and described the encounter as follows. And here I quote, "That look was not crossed between two men. If I knew how to explain in depth the nature of that look, exchanged as through the glass of an aquarium between two beings that inhabit two different milieux, I would be able to explain the sense of the great madness of the Third Reich." End of quote. The propaganda of all sorts that aims first at producing the other as a threat, and second, after that, as less than human, the other as less than human, and in some cases as something, as Levy writes, something to be eliminated, is at the core of genocides. Let's not forget Mladić's words again. Go on with the artillery fire. Don't let them sleep. Let's make them crazy. In Brazil, we witness this through the categories of cidadão de bem, trabalhador, vagabundos, which means good citizens, workers, and delinquents. And it has been naturalized by a considerable part of the population and many of our current political leaders that the delinquents should be physically exterminated by the police, by militias, by anyone. The category of delinquent is highly racialized in a country where 79% of the people who were murdered by the police are Black. We have witnesses this last week here in Rio de Janeiro, when the deadliest police operation in the history of the city killed 29 people in Jacarezinho, the favela, which is mostly inhabited by Afro-Brazilians in the city. The killings were cherished by the president himself and many of his supporters. It is exasperating to see the comments relating the right to live of these people to condition of workers or good citizens. So I will start to conclude my presentation here. I have tried to tackle two main phenomena I understand are closely related to genocides, mass murders, and political violence. Imagining space as bounded spaces and homogeneous, and the second, dehumanization of entire groups of peoples. Those are two phenomena that seem very much alive these days in political discourses and practices, from Brazil to Bosnia to United States to Hungary to Myanmar and so on. Among the many things I have learned conducting research on these topics, one stands out, which is never take for granted your rights, peace, and democracy. I would also add that it doesn't take too much, and it doesn't take too many to erode these rights. Therefore, let's stay aware and vigilant. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Renata. I'm really touched with your presentation. When you identify common grounds in these dynamics of the state violence and racist violence, especially in this moment we are facing in Brazil with the extermination of indigenous. We had two attacks this week against Yanomamis nation in the Amazon. Nobody talks about that. It's a natural fact in Brazil, looks like. And especially about Jacarezinho, the great massacre we had 2 weeks ago in Rio. Professor Raquel Guerra is from Rio, right, Professor? Your presentation brings to our reality these important considerations. Thank you very much. We can talk afterwards about that. And now I'd like to introduce you, Professor Dr. Hikmet Karsic. Please correct me if I pronounce it correctly, Professor Hikmet. Professor Hikmet is a genocide scholar based in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. He is a researcher at the Institute for Islamic Tradition of Bosniaks, IITB, in Sarajevo, and a senior fellow with the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy in Washington, DC. He was the 2017 Auschwitz Institute for Peace and Reconciliation Keene State College Global Fellow. So we are very happy and honored to have you here, Professor Hikmet. You have the word. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's really a pleasure to be in such a company of really great experts and people. Some of you who I know from before, some of you who I know from your work, which I read, and of course, it's a great pleasure to be talking after my dear friends Haris and Alma, and of course after the great presentation by Renata. I'd like to start my I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, luckily, after Haris and Alma's experience. So I will be giving a short talk and trying to sum up some of the main issues which are to be covered regarding some contemporary issues in Bosnia and in relation to some global affairs. Now, I would like to start off with a short story which happened to me in 2018. I was contacted by a Brazilian journalist to give an interview about the risk for mass atrocities in Brazil. And while we were talking about experiences from the ex-Yugoslavia, we were talking for almost an hour, and he told me, yeah, Hikmet, in the end, I know there are so many similarities that there is a risk of political violence and mass atrocities and so on, but the situation in Brazil is different. We had the World Cup in 2014. We are progressing, we're more than and so on. And then I replied to him. I said, "Yeah, that's great, but Sarajevo had the Winter Olympic Games in 1984, so it didn't really matter much in 1992." So my point being is that for a genocide to occur in a society, it doesn't really matter at what level of modernization or progress you are. Genocide can occur anywhere, anytime, and be committed by anyone. So there's no proposition for somebody to be committing mass atrocities more than the other, and so on and so forth. So that's something which we really need to focus in the beginning and make it clear. And this is something which has been very greatly presented by Haris in his presentation. The different levels of genocide, the different phases of genocide which occur in a society before the actual killing starts. So that's one thing. The other thing is that genocide does not stop once the killing stops. So genocide can continue after the physical extermination stops. And this is something which we're seeing in many societies, post-genocidal societies today. In relation to Bosnia, when we talk about genocide in Bosnia, we can talk about two main phases. The first phase is 1992. That's when the majority of the crimes committed occurred in 1992. The most famous act of genocide was July 1995 genocidal massacres of Bosniak men and boys in Srebrenica. And that's where most of the world focus was on because of the, again, international connection that we have to the war in Bosnia. Now, maybe due to the very disturbing and very, very bad way how the so-called international community dealt with the war in Bosnia, maybe this is one of the reasons why the Bosnian genocide is something which is still to this day very much denied and where we are facing a lot of historical revisionism when we talk about truth. This is something which we unfortunately to this day find a lot of support in different Western academia. So when we talk about genocide denial or mass atrocity denial, the denial of the atrocities started once the atrocities were committed. So, for example, in 1992, the first larger massacre occurred in Sarajevo in May 1982 when the Bosnian Serb forces shelled a bread line in the center of Sarajevo, where the how do you call it? Where almost more than 20 citizens were killed by the shelling of the Bosnian Serb army. And immediately we had the Bosnian Serb media talking about how this crime scene was staged by the Bosnian government in order to get some sort of sympathy from the West, so that the Bosnian government is killing its own citizens in order to get some sort of Western intervention in the country. And then again, this later on continued in 1983, 94, 95, and so on. So each time a Bosnian Serb sniper killed a Bosnian child in the siege of Sarajevo, this was the Bosnian government or its forces were accused of doing this. Or every time a larger massacre occurred, such as the Markale marketplace massacre in 94 and 95, the Bosnian government was accused of this. So this same rhetoric, this same narrative which was used back in 1994 is still being used today. The only difference is in 1994, this rhetoric, which was used in 94, 95, 96, and after the war, was something which you could find in the sidelines of some Serbian media. Today, you can find this in Western academic books. So if you go and buy a book published by a very famous American publisher, you can find these things inside. Now, how is it possible that such a narrative, such a rhetoric, which has been established by courts, so the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia established who and when bombarded the marketplaces in Sarajevo, and at what times and by whom. People were found guilty for this, but it seems that in some Western academic circles, the judicial established truth doesn't really matter. And this is something which is basically the largest problem that we scholars face in our fight against denialism. And this denial, so in the last decade, has become mainstreamed. So we have two basically things which are going on. First is triumphalism, which Harris coined the term triumphalism, in which war criminals and war crimes are being celebrated by people. So people are happy that 8,000 people were killed in 4 days in Srebrenica. The other part is that we have denialism, in which we have people who deny that this ever occurred. And then we have something which is a sort of combination by both, in which you have people who are at the same time celebrating and denying the crimes occurring. So in this case, this denialism now has gone into the mainstream. So it is basically popular to deny crimes which occurred. So it's something which has become cool. We have memes made out of this. You have Serb nationalist songs which are being famous on YouTube. And for a long time, these things were ignored, in the sense that even some Bosnian scholars would ignore these things, saying, it doesn't really matter because the judicial institutions conducted their investigations and the truth is out there, and the whole world knows what happened here. In reality, it's that most people don't really know what happened here. Younger generations, especially Generation Z and so on, people who are glued to TikTok and to other stuff, they don't really have the ability. If they don't learn in schools, they don't really get the message. They don't really get the truth. So if it's difficult tackling denialists who can publish in major U.S. Publishers, then imagine how difficult it is to talk to younger generations who are exposed only to social media. So that's one of the one of the biggest difficulties that we face. Secondly, this level of triumphalistic presentation or celebration of the crimes which were committed, which are found on YouTube, which are found on social media, have been picked up by the global far right today. And this is something which is largely ignored until two major events happened. Firstly, the Oslo terrorist attack, and later on the Christchurch terrorist attack, because people were shocked when the Christchurch terrorist live streamed his massacre while he was en route to the Al Noor Mosque, and while he in the background was playing a song which was composed in 1994 by a very unknown local Bosnian Serb singer. And this song, which is called Karadzic, Lead Your Serbs, has become some sort of unofficial anthem of the global far right. You have dozens of memes and different cartoons and images being shared all over social media. And we have come to a stage where people who committed genocide, who are being glorified and lionized by music, have become some sort of icons for, you know, far right extremists from New Zealand to Norway. And to make matters worse is that you will find more once you get into these channels, once you see all these different websites and forums and 4chans and so on, then you'll see to what extent people who committed genocide are being accepted as role models. So that's one of the most frightening things one can see. So basically, denial has entered all aspects of society in the Balkans, and most evidently in Serbia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And in order to battle these kind of denialist approaches, of course, education is the most important thing. But the second part is that how do you combat denialist networks when they are deeply embedded in government institutions, in academia, and I mean basically all pores of society, and not only in one geographical region, but globally. So this is something which is we're coming to some new terms, we're coming to some new truths. We are facing some new speak which is being propagated by academics, by journalists all over. And the most let's say the most shocking part in all of this is that and of course I'm a person who doesn't like to be only Bosnian centric, so I'm trying to see how these things act out in other genocides. What you can see here in the case of Bosnia is that the same people who denied crimes committed in Bosnia today, 25 years ago, or the same media which did this, today deny crimes being committed in Syria. Today deny crimes being committed on Uyghurs, deny crimes being committed in Central African Republic, denied Darfur 10 years ago. So you have the same people who are publishing these kind of things, and it's shocking that especially some leftist circles in the West promulgated Serb denialism and mainstreamed it through their works, and today are mainstreaming and denying the genocide against Uyghurs in China. And not only this aspect of genocide in terminological sense itself, but also deny the fact that concentration camps exist, for example. And this is something which Bosnians faced in 1982, when the first camps which were discovered in summer 1982 were being denied by leftist magazines in Great Britain, such as Living Marxism, which is the most famous at that time. And they were later on sued by ITN, and then they went bankrupt. But the people who wrote for them, the people who endorsed them, the people who supported them, today still hold some very important positions in these institutions, and later on, I mean, continue to deny other atrocities being committed worldwide. Yes, so this is something. I mean, in short, this is my short presentation, my short presentation of the main things which I had to say. And of course, I would like to focus more on the questions which we can later on discuss in the discussion itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Hikmet. Very good presentation. It reminds me, your presentation reminds me a conference by Professor Erik Voegelin in 1964 at the Ludwig Maximilian Universität in Munich, when he spoke to the public that the most important challenge is not to make narrative history and rule the past, but to do historical criticism and to dominate the present. That's what I reminded about on your presentation. The denialism, as Professor Gregory Stanton used to say, is the last stage of genocide, the genocidal process. Thank you for your presentation. Well, I'd like to thank you, all of you, and now to propose some ideas, some debates. We have more, around 15 minutes here to complete 2 hours of event. If you have any consideration and idea to offer, please feel free.
Can I pose?
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, Flavio.
Yeah, you have the word.
Okay. So I would like to pose a question to you, Flavio, as you are a lawyer, but also to the other panelists. There are many questions that are in my head in this moment, but there is one that has been with me for a long time, and that is the word genocide. We have had a lot of debates about it. And my question is related to something that Hikmet mentioned in his presentation. He used the wording judicially established truth. What happens when judicial powers, when a legal process does not establish that something is a genocide? What happens, like in a case of Armenia? It was so long ago and the system was not that developed, and it has not yet been called a genocide. Who has the right to participate in this discussion and to call something a genocide? Because as I see it here, law has a certain epistemological monopole over truth. And if it hasn't been called a genocide, if something wasn't called a genocide or defined as a genocide in a legal process, it can be used the other way around, and it can be used as an argument for denial from my point of view. So I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah, for sure. This is a very interesting and important question. I have the impression that, well, first of all, the courts are the projection of the state, of the official speech. So when the court doesn't recognize a genocide, the state legitimates the violence. When the court says or decides that there is no genocide, and we know when the situation is clearly a genocide, what the state is saying that, okay, you can do it again. I know because this is my impression, because it happens all the time in Brazil. For example, when I speak about a genocide to the students, well, we think about Holocaust, we think about Srebrenica, we think about Rwanda, but the Brazilians think that we do not have genocides in Brazil. Oh, the indigenous, they do not know that we have more than 300 and different nations in Brazil. The Indians are the Indians. This is a discrimination expression now. And when I say, but we have a recognized genocide in 1993, recognized by our Supreme Court against the Yanomamis, the student became surprised. Oh, so we have a genocide, because the court said, well, but we have many more other genocides, despite the court. But we have this clearly construction of the truth from the court's decisions. And at least in Brazil, the courts are conservative. they are composed by hegemonic persons, right? We do not have a diversity in Brazil. We do not have women in the courts. We do not have blacks in the court. We do not have indigenous in the court. In 518 years of history, for the first time, we have one indigenous woman in our parliament. So we have a racist structure that keeps the official speech and, by consequence, the history, denying the genocides in Brazil. And the current denial movement is a world phenomenon, as Alma said, as Hikmet said, as Hari said, also Renata. The denialism is a consequence of the post-truth, as Professor Harris considered to me during our debates for this event, right? So we really have to go deeply in this question. Why the court's decisions are predominant, are constantly ruling the history, interpretation, and consequence. Well, but this is an idea. You please, you can go on.
Can I join in Asia or Flavio? Flavio, thank you very much. Yeah, these are all, I agree with all your points. This is how it is. But not, as we know, most genocide, those even that we referred to tonight, didn't have the whole legal mechanism to test it, to prove it, and to confirm it judicially that the case, a particular case was a genocide. Nonetheless, it doesn't stop us as researchers, as academics, to research and to argue and to prove the point that that there was an intent to destroy a group of people, that actually this would have happened. So us academics who are outside of the legal profession might have more freedom to look at the kind of cultural dimension, to look at the effects of a particular violence against a particular group, and then to what degree this destroyed or affected the substance, the very existence of that particular group. Nonetheless, we shouldn't focus all our attention on only genocide as a crime. There's also a variety, a plethora of other crimes that are as bad as genocide, but are sometimes perceived as probably not as so bad. So if it's either genocide or nothing, well, crimes against humanity, even in the wording of it is it's something that tells you this is the worst crime that a human can commit. So sometimes these other crimes that do not necessarily constitute genocide or are not tested in courts, if they're genocide or not, are perceived as not as bad, and they are very bad. Secondly, the courts and the legal professionals, they look for that key element of genocide. It's not that people got killed, it's not that violence was committed, it's not that they are mass graves and people displaced. They look for the intent, that there was a plan to destroy a particular group in whole or in part. And that intent is very hard to find. It's not one sort of evidence that's required. Ideally, there would be a final solution document signed and everything is clear. But final solution, appears in a variety of formats, and sometimes needs to be circumstantial evidence put together in order to prove it. So that's one of the challenges that courts have. Nonetheless, as researchers, we can research the space that people inhabit or inhabited. We can, effects such as forced displacement, destruction of culture. There are so many elements that we keep exploring and should actually keep exploring. I would also add creative works, from fiction to memoirs to movies, they have probably played a much more important role to tell the stories, such as the story of the Holocaust, for example, and Schindler's List, and Primo Levi's works and Elie Wiesel's work would have probably contributed more than Nuremberg archives, which is there, but it's reserved for experts, for people who are researching it, not for the masses. So we shouldn't stop at calling something genocide or not, and then not bothering to know more about it. Several governments have also issued resolutions recognizing the particular historical violence as genocide, such as, for example, the Armenian genocide, which was recognized also by the United States not long ago. Several countries, in addition to ICTY ruling, several countries across the globe, including United States, Australia, EU countries, have recognized also, have issued resolution on Srebrenica, commemorating Srebrenica genocide. So there are academic as well as political and public fora that can talk and should talk and discuss genocide, not just was it or was it not, but looking at all the shades of every politically motivated violence that might be or might be not actual genocide in legal terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Haris. Natalia, would you like to talk? Okay.
Thank you so much. Sure. I mean, what an amazing event. Thank you so much, Professor Flavio, for holding this together. I really loved it. And just a quick mention on what Aja was talking about, and Professor Halilovic as well. I mean, this is really hard to answer who gets to say what is or what was genocide, right? And I'm going to say, as an example, if I was an international judge or something, one day maybe, honestly, I wouldn't only look at those legal precedents to say what is or what was genocide. The first thing I was going to do was to buy like a whole shelf of historical, anthropological, and all those kind of studies and books, or maybe download because to be environmental friendly, but then and read all of them to understand this interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary view or what genocide means. Because if we get to trust law, and this breaks my heart when I say it because we're lawyers, but if we have to trust law to say what happened and what didn't happen, I mean, we are doomed as humanity, because law works in the logic of responding really late to what happens. And when it gets late, I mean, when this period of time just goes by, sometimes we lose people like Alma, who's going to talk about her own experience. And then, but then we have like 30, 40, 50 years of period of time before we get to say what happened or didn't. And sometimes we lose these people, we lose their histories that were shared with us. And I mean, this is really interesting and sad about law, because, for example, in a legal research, if I get to quote or mention as a citation a historical book, anthropologic studies, even a movie, as Professor Halilovic was saying, I get criticized for that. We all do, because they say, no, you have to just mention and read and then quote legal books. And then I say, but I cannot understand everything just reading people who studied law talking about history, people who studied law talking about anthropology. I mean, I cannot understand. I have to work with different subjects to understand what happened as a whole. But I mean, just a quick comment from my heart. And then I would have a quick question. I know we are running out of time, to Professor Flavio, and of course, everyone else who wants to comment, because he has been studying for the last few years, I mean, many years, about indigenous genocide. And I would like to ask, of those 11 stages that Professor Halilovic was explaining, and I just printed that, I had a screenshot and then I have it printed now because I didn't know about all those stages. I mean, I've heard that there are stages, but I didn't have them in the same screen together. So now I have them. And I would ask Professor Flavio to, if he sees those stages in this indigenous genocide in Brazil, in which stage are we? Or if we jumped some of the stages and we just we are in a worse situation now, and how can we stop it? I know it's really hard to answer this, but what can we do as academia?
Well, this is a good question, and my answer will be connected with the question that Professor Silva Steiner had just sent to us. Yes, it's so clear to identify some states in Brazil proposed by Gregor Stanton, as Professor Hikmet showed us too. For example, discrimination, racism. Well, our president said recently, they will become just like us. They are becoming more and more like us. Well, we are not civilized for sure in Brazil. And the indigenous suffer discrimination. They are in reserves. They do not have, they suffer the violence of the state and also from private groups. We have 14 ships shooting at the indigenous this week in Brazil. 2 little children died. So we have many of these states in Brazil for sure, but we do not have a linear, a straight and only one way of exterminations, right? The culture are always under attack in Brazil, the indigenous culture. The forests are being destroyed. Now in this month, we have the highest number of deforestations in Brazil in the last years. So when you destroy the forest, you destroy a culture, a nation, very old nations. So we have it, in my opinion. But Professor Silva Steiner has just sent us a question. What the panelists think about the indiscriminate use of the word genocide for any kind of violent act, including urban violence. I would like to hear you all, because this is a word you have. We cannot use the term genocide for any situation, right? Please feel free to start.
I'll start, and then I would love anyone else to continue. I did mention at the beginning of my presentation genocide. The overuse of it sometimes is almost like a buzzword. Like it loses the meaning in this being overused and thrown at out there in public arena at anything. Recent anti-vaxxers in Europe, for example, that was a kind of such a disservice to the Holocaust, to the memory of the Holocaust. Those who deny the existence of the coronavirus and refuse to get vaccinated, put the yellow stars on them in public as suggesting that they are, this is the Holocaust being perpetrated against them. Sometimes it goes to the extremes where this is not only meaningless, but it's dishonors the memory, and it kind of almost mocks what the Holocaust means, what the yellow stars meant during the 40s. And referring to anything as genocide, has that potential to kind of this to get that term overused and lose its meaning. So we can find the proper word to say how they come to this, to that lose its potency. And I agree that there is too much use of this and in different contexts. Nonetheless, it might also act as a strong warning. That's how it should be. If a scholar of the caliber of Professor Flavio suggests and tells that this is what's happening, the violence against indigenous peoples, which might be direct or indirect, so destroying their environment, it's creating conditions in which life cannot be continued of that group. So it is intent to destroy that people. We should listen. We should listen and we should take action. But I do agree that, using genocide for everything, it's not necessarily a good thing, or it does then make genocide victims somehow less victims, or anyone is victims. So if getting vaccine or not is a personal choice. So it's not really nothing to do with the Holocaust or what happened in Srebrenica or what's happening across the world today. But I would be very happy for Renata and Hikmet and Alma to join, or anyone else to say what they think.
I also think that there is another dimension, because it seems that to mobilize effects, like you have to have either genocide or nothing. Because, for example, the very idea of crimes against humanity, as Haris was saying, isn't that very powerful already? But sometimes it's like, if it's not genocide, it's only crimes against humanity. So this is not, you know, and I know there is this discussion a lot, for example, in Bosnia, where many of the events that we all talked about weren't recognized as genocide, and many survivors of these events are a bit like, we are not recognized, and right. So I don't have an answer, but I look with a lot of curiosity of how the term genocide is used, and how it mobilized this much effect. Like, as okay, if our group committed crimes against humanity is not as bad, like we are not so horrible, but not genocide, you know, because I also saw some people telling me that, like, why do we need to use the word genocide to describe what happened in Srebrenica? Why? I mean, there was some things that happened there, but why genocide? Isn't that just to polarize people, to enhance the divisions and stuff? So I'm not agreeing with that, but I'm just saying that that it's interesting to see how the word mobilized so much, and maybe that's why many people use it in a daily basis for situations that are not properly legally applied, but maybe to create this effect of, look how bad the situation is, and sometimes it is very bad.
Alma would like to talk.
Just a sec. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, I'm Master of Education, so I can say some smart things about education of genocide. But what we label as genocide, I would like to leave that to genocide scholars, you know. But I want to say the following. As a Master of Education and within educational studies, we have this question that we need to investigate and to research. Why should we learn about genocide? What should we learn about genocide? And how should we learn about genocide? And when we research those stuff, and when we want to give some advice to educational institution, we talk about those questions with people who understand education process. So when it comes to question, why should we learn about genocide, we invite and involve people who do understand educational studies. So when it comes to the definition of genocide, that is some other field. In my own opinion, we should leave that to genocide scholars. They are the right one to label something as genocide.
Thank you, Alma. Very good considerations. Oh, I think Alma. She's here. I'm seeing now. Thank you for your considerations. I'd like to give the word to my friend, Professor Raquel. She's from Rio, a PhD researcher also. Thank you, Raquel, for your presence here.
Thank you, Professor Flavio. I am very, very honored to be here, especially because what I can see is beyond like human rights, it's human being. So I am very honored. And I would like to highlight that I am honored as well that Sylvia Starn is here. So I am very happy for that. But I would like to bring 2 points. One about Alma presentation, and the second one about Renata, because it's linked to Rio. So about Alma, I don't know Alma, but if you know, but Alma means soul in Portuguese. So what I felt when I was hearing you, you really touched my soul. I am very honored to hear you, and especially because being a human rights specialist, one of the things that I'm always concerned is about re-victimization, when you are a victim twice. And when I heard you about all the things that you and your family and colleagues and nationalists, like everyone suffered, you were totally a victim. But when like Netherlands soldiers or like organizations, they don't recognize that you are suffering twice. So I am very, very sorry about it. It's not something that we can forget. It's not something that we could bury. We have to bring light, and we have to bring the truth, trying to stop these events happen again. So I am very, very honored to hear you. Thank you very much for sharing. I can imagine that it's not easy. I was very emotional. I was crying because it's about you. It's about like myself. We are humans as well. So we are brothers and sisters. So I am very, very sorry. And I will live here. Like I want to write about this. I want to share your story. So we keep like talking and avoiding the unlies beyond. And thank you very much. And Renata, thank you. I hope you always remember that your name is so beautiful.
Yes, I did hear that sometimes, but I forget about it. So thank you for reminding me.
Yes, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. I'm sure about it.
Yeah. But I must say this, it was really difficult to learn to talk about this, and I couldn't do it for years. And I remember one time I was talking to our friend Hassan Nohanovic, and he was always so strong. And I used to ask him, how come? How can you be so strong? You never cry, you never get tired of telling your story. And he said to me, we don't have time to be weak. We need to be strong. And he said to me something like, go home and go cry. And if you need 20 years, then come back and be strong and tell your story. So that's what I did.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. And we must be stronger together. So I feel stronger with you. So thank you very much, each of you. And Renata, I was hearing you and I was thinking about myself as well. I am a human rights lawyer. I used to work to Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And my point is bringing what happened here in Brazil, exactly like in Jacarezinho community, that the policemen, they enter, they killed, they shoot a lot of people. And I will bring the first case that the Inter-American Court of Human Rights condemned Brazil by excessive use of force by police during raids in favela. So it was 2 different events in 1994 and 1995 when the police and military officials from Rio, they entered in the community called Nova Brasília in the morning, and they invaded houses, they shot in the occupants, they detained them, they shoot them, and the children were raped during the policy operation. This is very common, unfortunately. The children were raped. And in this case, the court highlighted that the victims of violence are often young, poor, black, unarmed in Brazil. So this is a case from 2017. It was the first sentence against Brazil concerned violence. And the court said that most of the cases are young, poor, black, unarmed. and this happened again, and the society is tired of it, and the children were raped, and until now there is nothing more, and we are still denying these kinds of violence. So relating to the questions of Silvia Starn, it's so difficult for us as Brazilians. Is this a genocide? Is not, including for the Kurd? But what I can learn from Haris and what I can understand that, okay, it's a difficult term, but at the same time, the Kurd highlights that it was often young, poor, Black, and armed. So I'm sharing more as citizen than human rights lawyer. It's something difficult for me as well. And it's so important to have a sentence against Brazil in these issues, so we have hands to fight against it.
Thank you, Raquel. I think you're more, you know more about the situation than I do. So, but I think they say people, Natalia said, oh, people keep denying, saying it was a police operation that went bad, it happens. But I think it's much more than that, to be honest. I think it will almost good if that was it. I think people really endorse it because our society already decided there are some people that are not worth living, and they must be killed, to be honest. So when that happens, the first reaction is, oh, but they were like drug dealers or anything. And the first thing that families do, and which I think is very heartbreaking, is to take here we have a work, how do you call, carteira de trabalho. So we have a working document to prove that you are a worker. So people sometimes the family take the working document to show he was not a delinquent, he was a worker, so he should not be killed. So that's the degree of our society is just very sick in this, because if you're not a worker, then you can be killed. So that's the thing that I was trying to say.
Thank you, Professor Renata. Well, we are closing to our finish. It was a wonderful opportunity for me. I hope this is only the first one live or seminar on beginning genocide scholars new net in the world. We must consider that Haris is in Australia. He must sleep because he must be so tired. Ludmila is in Berlin, Alma is in Netherlands, and Asia is in Croatia. Hikmet is in Sarajevo. So we have here an international new group. I'm very, very, very honored and happy to have you here. I'd like to, well, Alma says that Haris never sleeps. I know how it is. I'm just like you, Haris. We can talk anytime. I would like to give you the word for your final statements. But before, I must thank to two special persons, very important to me. The first is Asia, my friend from Croatia. We studied together at the University of Toronto and Zorian Institute in Canada 7 years ago, when he used to talk a lot about to study genocide there. Nothing could be happened if Asia was not with me. Asia made it possible. Thank you, Asia, for your friendship and for your competence and for your special commitment with human rights. And I must say, with the Europeans, immigrants and refugees, because Asia is a hero in Croatia on this question, I must say. Oh yeah, she is. Another special person is the Brazilian professor Heitor Loureiro, one of maybe the great expert on Armenian genocide in Brazil. Heitor is the professor who put me in contact with Zorian Institute 7 years ago in Canada. And Heitor made it possible. He's not here, but his hearing us by the YouTube. Thank you, Heitor. And your final statements, please. Alma, you could talk first. Thank you.
Yes, you can hear me, of course. Well, I would like to thank you for being here with you. It was really, really inspiring. And I'm not going to talk a lot, but I would like to give us next question to think about, and maybe something for next meeting. How can we help genocide survivors? How can we use our experience and knowledge to help people who are now genocide survivors? So to help them rebuild their lives. And I hope that it's going to be easier for them than it was for us. And I'm thinking about Yazidi people and Uyghurs, for example, but there are many more.
Thank you, Alma. Now, Professor Haris.
Thank you very much. I'll also echo Alma's words and also what Rachel said. So we are connected through humanity, but also those crimes, both genocide crimes against humanity, as much as they might be not perpetrated in a local context, they are universal crimes. They are crimes against all of us, against humanity, against the core of what makes us humans. And they should, they should matter to everyone, either in Australia, Brazil, and Bosnia, wherever they take place. And not only retrospectively looking at what happened, but also what might be happening right now in front of our eyes, or not in front of our eyes, but somewhere else, it's in front of someone else's eyes. So it is our duty, our responsibility as intellectuals and as fellow humans to address these issues, to talk about them, to take action, to make various forms of articulating what's taking place, and especially people who are lawyers, people who are academics, who are activists. I think that's our primary duty. So because we in some ways we create a public opinion, and we should use that privilege and that responsibility wisely. Thank you all. We've been talking over 2 days now from Australian perspective. It's already Sunday, close to Sunday towards 1 o'clock. But I am not tired. I really feel energized by being with you. And thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Haris. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Professor Renata, would like to make your final statements?
Sure. So I would just like to thank you, everyone. Again, I was very anxious to be here for the whole week. I was, waiting for this Saturday morning, and it was even better than what I expected. And I hope this conversation is just the beginning of a broader and longer project. And I really felt like, Haris, I feel really energized right now with this talk and wanting to do more stuff. And yes, so thank you very much. It really touched me, and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you, Professor Renata. We are very happy with you here. You made a difference also. Professor Hikmet, thank you for I'm reading your interview here. Thank you very much for our presentation. Please, your final reflections.
Well, first of all, thanks to everyone for organizing this, and I hope that there are so many similarities that we can connect between Brazil and South America with this part of Europe, and I hope that in the future we'll do so, because it's something which we can draw so many parallels with our joint experiences. One of the things which I would like to underline, maybe as some sort of a concluding remark, is that perpetrators of mass atrocities, if they go unpunished, they usually continue to take part in some sort of organized crime or corruption and hinder any reform processes in the country itself. So it's in the interest of the state itself to deal with these perpetrators, and that would be my concluding remark for all of this. And of course, many thanks to all to everyone, especially to my friend Harris in Down Under, and let's continue doing these kind of webinars in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor Hikmet. Hope to have you again with us soon. We are, as we said, we are creating, we're trying to create a new international genocide scholars net. It's a kind of Brazilian, Balkan, Australian project now, but I think it will be larger. Asia, please, I need to hear you. Your final statements too.
No, I have nothing to add. I have to thank you, Flavio, for initiating this and for your willingness to continue these kind of conversations. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for their time.
Thank you, Asia. Well, we finished. I'd like to thank the other invited professors here, Professor Natalia, Professor Raquel, my dear friend, Professor Ludmila from Berlin, and also to Boston is Latsen. Please tell me if I pronounced correctly. You made this opportunity much more brilliant and important. Thank you very much. And for sure, you'll be invited to talk in our next meetings and seminars. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Flavio, for the great conversation. Have a nice weekend. A weekend, yes. I'm
very happy with you here.
Oh, me too. I'm just a little bit tired because I had to give classes until 2 in the morning and I'm not in the weekend yet.
Okay, well, I must invite you to talk about Hannah Arendt and genocide, okay?
Well, it'll be a pleasure for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.